Hello, everyone. This game is from the Isle of Man tournament that just started. There's a lot of games that I'm going to be analyzing, so bear with me. I'm going to be showing you a lot of games today. So this first one is this round one, by the way, and there's a lot of grandmasters and international masters in there. So I'm going to be trying to not only cover the top players, but also some of the lesser talked about players. So this first game is between Grandmaster Nigel Short and with the white pieces, and with the black pieces, a woman's international master, uh, Osmanodja. I think that's how you say it. Please forgive me for any pronunciation. This was a good game. So Nigel began with d4, knight f6, knight f3, d5, c4, e6, g3. So we see this kind of Catalan type setup. Bishop d2, bishop e7, bishop g2, castles, castles, c6, and now queen b3. And now we see some imbalances and battle lines are drawn here. We see that black has an extremely solid position. Anytime black has this triangle type setup, definitely signifies a solid approach, right? Black usually will be defending for some time in this solid posture in hopes under best circumstances to achieve this liberating pawn break c5, and under even better circumstances the pawn break e5. Until then, black, although remaining very solid, usually will have a cramped game and have very little prospects of winning. Okay, most of black's wins will come late due to white over pursuing and being over aggressive in the middle game and leaving weaknesses. So this type of game is not for everyone, especially if you like to have counter chances, um, against your opponent. This is a very solid game where it's not easy for white just to overrun you, but you can have a cramped position and where you will be getting tortured for a long time. On the white side, um, in this Catalan position, this particular position, we see that white has this common fianchetto setup, signified by this formation with the bishop here on g2, and it's very it's a very sturdy setup against any kingside attacks that black may be deciding to um, use against white. For instance, in Stonewall or something where black tries to attack on the king side. So a fianchetto is a very strong defense against that, especially when the bishop remains. So of course, one of the strategies uh, to deal with that is always like trying to eliminate this bishop if you can in the middle game. But again, so white sets up this sturdy defensive formation here, and on the offensive side, this bishop is peering down this long diagonal, and white strategy is to slowly break down these queen side pawns and creating weakness on the queen side, and basically exploit exploit black later on, in the ending or late middle game scenario. So this game is this type of setup can be very torturous to black. I would never play like this type of setup against this because it's like I said, black has little chances to really create any counterplay. So white can kind of just go along with this this slow grinding type plan as we're going to see. So basically, white is going to be attacking on. Oh, and there's another thing I wanted to say, and actually I'll say it in a couple of moves. Let's keep going. So white is attacking on the queen side here. Now, black plays b5, right, trying to resolve the situation in the center here. Nigel takes, c takes b5, c takes b5. Now, this is the point I wanted to make after rook c1. Okay, now, here we can see we have this relatively symmetrical position here as far as pawn structure is concerned. However, we see this pawn is unprotected right now on the b file. And of course, black is counting on queen b5, then bishop a6 with this x-ray on the e pawn here. So that pawn is temporarily immune. So of course Nigel did not grab that pawn. However, the point I wanted to make is in this type of setup, black is in a situation where he's, or she's rather in this case, pretty much forced to play on the same side of the board that white is playing on, which in this case is the queen side. However, the problem is that white is a few steps ahead of black already in generating his play on the queen side. For instance, the queen is already here on b3, exerting pressure on b5 and also on d5. The bishop is already here, g2, again, exerting pressure. It's a latent pressure. It's not direct right now, but later on, say after this knight jumps to e5, will be exerting great pressure on the queen side. As you saw, the rook is already swung over to the queen side. So white's queen side attack is already underway. And as you can see in this position, black has no prospects on the king side as far as attacking over there. So black is forced to seek play on the same side of the board where white already has an advantage. So to me, this is already bad strategically for black, because black either has to go for counterplay on the side of the board where he's at a disadvantage as far as development is concerned, or she has to adopt just a wait and hold policy, which is always bad against a strong grandmaster. Okay, let's look how the game continue now. So rook c1. Again, notice how white already has the attack going on the queen side already. Bishop a6. So now the pawn is protected. Okay, but I don't like this situation because the bishop is passively placed here. Right? You can't tell me that this bishop wants to be here on a6. Okay, but as you can see, the bishop's locked in. So this is a common issue in these Queen's Gambit decline type positions. What to do with the problem bishop? Okay. Again, if a6, then you have this situation now where all of these pawns are on the same color as this bishop. Still, maybe more prudent, instead of kind of condemning this bishop here on a6, is probably a move like queen b6, protecting the pawn and bringing the queen to a square that is a little bit more, natural for it anyway. Okay, we continue. So bishop a6, bishop b4. This is a common strategic idea in these type of structures whereby white will exchange off the dark square bishop. You see that in Queen's Gambit declines, French defense, Caro-Kann, even Sicilian. And the point is real simple, is that with this pawn structure, notice how most of white's important central pawns are on the light squares, even this one. So if you get rid of the dark square bishops, then it will exacerbate the weakness left behind on the squares of the opposite color. And so this is the rationale. You see the same thing in the stone wall also. In the stone wall defense, you have all of these pawns on the light squares, and one of white's major plans in the stone wall again is the early exchange of the dark square bishops, and this is the reason. And you see all the weaknesses left behind on the dark squares. So bishop takes b4. This exchange clearly benefits white here. Queen improves, and now look at the dark squares. Okay, black can't even put his queen on e7 or d6 right now because white has taken control. Finally, queen b6. And this makes this move a little redundant here. Knight e5, as I said, and now we see this bishop. Right, there's some latent power there, but knight e5 is provides a good tactical point as it prevents the knight from coming to c6. And this is one of the purposes behind queen b6, because knight c6 can't be played. After queen b6, you know, this move is on the table here. So knight e5 stops that from happening. And also it hinders the move knight bd7, which is very natural also, because then white might have access to this square. But knight takes d7 might just be good there also. So the woman's IM plays knight f d7. The idea of keeping an eye on that square with this knight. But this already shows symptoms of, you know, sickness in the position, because the moves look real awkward. The pieces look awkward. Look at the coordination of the pieces. It's like a bizarro setup. And it's funny because white is not doing that much. White's moves are real basic. You got the rook on c1, knight on e5. Like, what's, you know, it's just amazing, just these simple, you know, simple concepts. But the problem is, again, in black's position, no counterplay. There's no counterplay. So Nigel is just able to slowly and methodically just encroach black on the queen side. So knight takes d7. Knight takes d7. e3. So now, what's the problem in black's position? c5 square. That's the most important issue in the position right now. And now, of course, black would love to take this knight and put it right here, right? Or a rook and put it right there. Wouldn't that be lovely for black? However, the main difference here, and this is goes back to this move b5 that black played earlier, right, to try to resolve the position, is if black were to be able to get a piece on c4, white always has this move, right, b3, to prevent or kick a piece out of c4. Whereas black does not have a corresponding move. So if a knight gets to c5 or a rook gets to c5, black has no pawn moves to keep the piece out or eject it once it arrives there. So this is a big difference in the position. And remember, like I said, black is pretty much forced to play on the same side of the board where Nigel has the advantage. And this is why, although the position looks like pretty simple, black is in deep trouble here, because he's always a step or two behind, dude, just right out of the opening. So in this case, we have this c5 square. It's very important, and there's going to be a battle for that. And white maintains this pressure on this b pawn here. Black plays rook ac8. The understandable move, but perhaps it's time to get this bishop back here and start thinking about a5. Right, put the bishop, because the bishop's job is pretty much done here. So maybe bishop b7. and then try to get in a5. But of course, there's moves like bishop f1 to increase the pressure, and knight c3, moves like that. Okay, but it's definitely worth further consideration because this bishop here is dead. So even if black must consider sacrificing the pawn, right, just to get some counterplay, it's better than just getting slowly crushed. So rook a c8, knight d2. Why knight d2? Well, again, the idea of this, right, is on the table. So Nigel just takes a moment to put the knight there. Now, what I like about this move also is that it's not just a defensive move, but at an opportune moment, this knight will transfer here, and again, look to infiltrate that square with either a rook or a knight. But right now, it's serving a defensive duty, and for black to get there, you must be willing to give up in exchange. Knight b8, and now we see this idea on the table of just trying to drive the queen away. Now again, Nigel wants to move this knight, but he has to consider rook c8, and this explains the next move. Excuse me, rook c4. Now the bishop takes control over guarding this entry square, so now this knight is free. Nigel has already calculated the consequences of this move. As you will see, knight c6, and now he starts utilizing the c5 square. Of course, queen takes, rook takes. It's good for white with double attack on this pawn. Isn't it interesting how just a little bit of weakness in the position, in this case, you had this b pawn here and this bad bishop. Just a little bit of weakness in the position just causes so much trouble. If you look from the d file over, right, black's position looks pristine. There's nothing wrong with it. The problem in this position is on the A, B, and C files, and that's where the whole play, the whole drama unfolds. A, B, and C files. It's amazing. Just such a simple opening and weakness created at the beginning, and the whole game is just revolving around this B5 pawn, bishop on A6, C5 square. Let's keep going. Osmanodja does not want to trade queens. So queen B7 is played. Okay, so of course this knight was threatening, to move, and with them kind of discovered attack on the queen, so the queen gets out of dodge. And this move has a little bit of venom to it because we had the bishop on f1 and now the queen on a3. So this pawn is immobilized because the bishop would then be captured. Alright. Of course, black would love to be able to play that. Queen goes back to b6. It's like a draw offer. Please go back to queen. Please play queen c5. Of course, Nigel's going to continue with his plan. He simply plays knight b3. And you can see this, all of the pieces on the outpost. Rook c7. Preparing to double up. Rook ac1. h6. This is this one of those traditional moves that create some loft for the king. So there's no back rank mates at the end of some exchanges. h4. Good move in the end game, restricting black's pawns. There's a formation, has different names, but it's like a grip formation where white will have his pawn on h4, this pawn on, pawn on h5, pawn on g4, this pawn on f4, and this pawn on e5, and in end games, white gets an advantage where he can break through with the pawns on the king side, but that's a different subject altogether. But anyways, this is like a standard type setup. H4, gaining, that space for any possible endings. Knight B8. So, although black is orchestrated some trading in the position, white just has this overwhelming advantage just due to the weakness of this pawn, this bishop, and this control over the c5 square. So rook takes, and again, there's the use of that outpost square. Interesting too. Nimzovich says, I think it's in my system. I can't remember if it's in my system or blockade, but he talks about the outpost square and how it's like it serves as like a turnstile for different pieces. When you got a real good thing going on the outpost, it's not just like, say, the knight or whatever. It's like different pieces just use that as like an entry point into the opponent's position. And you see a good example of that in this game. You saw the rook there, and you see the knight there. Queen will show up at some point, all using the same square. In this case, we see the knight and queen attacking a6 again, and this bishop, poor bishop, this one of the worst bishops of all time, just constantly being harassed. So queen b6 and queen d3, and now again there's maximum pressure being put on this pawn, and there's even a threat to win this pawn now. For instance, after knight takes a6. Queen a5, trying to spark some counterplay, and Nigel just simply plays a3 here. a4 was also playable, exploiting the pin. Right, just a4. This capture cannot be made. So a3 from Nigel, and knight c6, and now he plays a4. And then finally the bishop goes back home. And Nigel has just won a clean pawn. Knight is driven back to e7. And now black is just struggling to hold on. Of course, now Nigel says, hey, undouble my pawns and let's go home with this endgame. So queen b6. Knight a4, and we see this discovered attack on the queen, as well as the knight on e7. Queen goes back. Again, we see the utilization of the c5 square by another piece. Queen d7. And now a nice tactic here from Short. b6. And there's all type of threats here. For instance, if queen takes a4, then you just simply have queen takes a7. And if a takes b6, then queen d8, picking up the bishop. So, in the game, black played a takes b6, and now the knight comes in. And now we have this guy ready and free to run up the board. Queen b7. Of course, b4 was definitely a good move here. Bishop b5 creates, kind of cuts the king off here, and also anticipating, also stopping the move knight c6 in this position. A good move here also is this queen d8 with this threat of queen d6. And then if knight c6, right, stopping the queen d8 check and threatening here, then just knight takes, queen takes c8, and b4. Okay, and Nigel will be winning there. So I showed you that variation so you can kind of see into Nigel's mind. So of course he saw the move queen d6, but he decides to play bishop to b5 first, which stops this idea. So now he's threatening to play queen d6. Okay, king f8, and there's queen d6, and now you can see the this idea. G6 again, more escape for the king. Now he plays queen to d8 check, just carrying through with his plan. Bishop d7 was possible at this stage. There's usually several ways to win. But queen d8 check, and now he does the same thing. So he checks the king away, and now there's some interference, and the knight on e7 is now unprotected. Bishop takes d7 by black. Knight takes d7. The problem is still there, what to do with this knight. Knight c6, natural move, but then that leads to mate in short order. Nigel plays queen f8 check, and black resigned because after king h7, then knight f6 would just be checkmate. I'll just show it to you. And you see all the squares covered by the pieces, right? Queen is covering these 3 squares, and the knight is covering those 2 squares. So the king goes knight knight. Okay. All right, let's sum up the game. Let's sum up the game. So first we see that black played a solid game. There's nothing wrong with playing that opening, but we can see that there was a high level of passivity. Black had no counterplay whatsoever, and eventually lashed out with a move b5, which Nigel exploited in customary fashion. Right, he's a very strong grandmaster, and you make a weakness like that, he's gonna latch onto it. So we saw the exploitation of a outpost, namely c5. We saw about 15 to 20 pieces use that square to penetrate the black position during the game. We also saw a miserable bishop, the dark square bishop, which is usually a great problem and has been a great problem historically in many openings. French defense, Queen's Gambit decline, and it's really that pawn structure with pawns on e6 and d5. Black has to be very careful of resolving that problem. So we saw as a result of b5, which we can say was a mistake, and an inclusion of the move bishop a6, and the weakness created on c5 as a result of b5 was just too much in the position. So and also we talked about this, playing on the same side of the board where you're weaker at. Black played in such a passive way that she was basically forced in the situation where she was playing on the same side of the board where she was weaker. The Nigel played on the queen side, but he was already ahead in development there, right? He had his attack started already early with queen b3 and rook c1, what have you. So black was playing catch up the whole game, and of course that doesn't work because a strong GM is not going to make mistakes and allow you to catch up. And so I hope you learned a lot from that game. That's a nice model of just playing too passively, and just not giving yourself really any winning chances whatsoever. Don't be scared of international masters and GMs when you play them. Go after them. Be confident and go after them. Don't say, oh, this guy's 2600, I gotta play solid. I mean, if that's your style already, then so be it. But if you're whatever, if you're a King's Gambit player, play the King's Gambit. Don't switch up because you're playing the GM. Just go for it. All right. So I'm gonna make some more videos, and I hope you enjoyed that one. Please like, subscribe. If the video is helping your chess, please feel free to donate. The link is on the bottom. I would appreciate it. Okay, thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.